All right, welcome to our demo theater. Can you hear me? Wave at me if you can hear me. No? Okay. Momentito. Huh. I may just have to speak louder. Definitely on. All right, I'm just going to speak louder into my microphone. How's now? Yes? Okay, great. So welcome to our demo theater. He's definitely louder than me. This session is how to tell your story with Esri storytelling apps. I'm Alison and this is Mark, and we're both JavaScript developers on Esri Story Maps team, and I think I'm just going to hold this. Yeah. How about now? Oh, okay. Great. So here's what we're covering today. Oh, that is way too loud. I'll be doing a quick intro to story maps, including a tour through our website and a short demo on how to build a cascade story map. And then Mark will get into the different ways to customize story maps, both for developers and non-developers, as well as some technical architecture of our apps. So if you've never worked with or seen story maps, you may be asking yourself, what are we even talking about? So at a high level, story maps are simple web apps that combine interactive maps, multimedia content, and user experiences to tell stories about the world. They're basically a way of communicating your GIS data to other people in your organization, or to the public, or to whoever your target audience may be. Story maps include an array of apps that provide different ways of interacting with our maps. They're responsive. They work on PCs, laptops, tablets, and smartphones. They incorporate builder functions that enable you to build an engaging story with no GIS or web development skills. However, if you're a developer, which this is Dev Summit, so this is geared more towards developers, all of our stuff is open source. It's all on GitHub. It's all free to download and customize as you see fit. Story maps are hosted by Esri in the cloud, or you can download and host them yourself if you want to. The hosted version is integrated into ArcGIS Online, and both versions are built around web maps as the tool to present your geographic data. There are a number of different uses for story maps, but the overarching theme here is communication. These apps are here to help you communicate your data to your audience. They can be used as annual reports, as marketing, as a substitution for a PowerPoint deck. They also have an autoplay function, so you can put your story maps on a kiosk or a display at a trade show or convention, and that can be an eye-catching way to engage people who are just walking by your kiosk. You can also use them in more personal ways, for instance, as a vacation journal or a tour of your favorite places in your city. The best place to learn more about story maps is our website, which is storymaps.arcgis.com, and we're just going to take a quick tour of that. Just kidding, that's on this screen. Momentito. Sweet. So here you'll find storytelling tips and tricks for making your apps shine. You can also sign up for our new monthly newsletter called Planet Story Maps. There's this little link here, sign up today. And on our homepage, you'll also find a featured story of the month to draw inspiration for your own apps. So this month's is Strengthening the Grid. And then there's a smaller gallery down here, and there will be a bigger gallery we will see in a second. Also from our homepage, you can go and discover more about our apps. We have 8 different templates to choose from, and you can get an overview of them from the apps page on our website, which is displayed here. They fall roughly into 3 categories. The first category is apps centered on a single map, so that's Map Tour, which is this guy right here. Crowdsource and Shortlist are 3 that are basically a single map that are very map-centric. We also have apps that are centered around displaying or comparing multiple maps. So that is Swipe here, so you've got like a slider between two maps. And then there's also Story Map Series, which has 3 different layouts, so you can sort of customize the look of your apps. And then we have two apps that have a narrative flow to them, and that is Journal and Cascade. This page gives you a description and visual representation of each app, along with a Learn More link for a more detailed dive into a specific app, a tutorial, a gallery link, and a build button that will launch each app's builder. If you want to learn more, each app has their own page with a nice little screenshot. This is a live link to an example app, and it'll tell you more. Here's some more links. Here's some more stuff. We put a lot of time into our website. You should check it out. Before we demo creating a story map, let's also just check out the gallery for inspiration. So if we go back up here, here's our gallery. The gallery displays the most recently added items first, so you know that the stuff at the top of the page is fresh and new. We can filter by the type of story map we're interested in. So for instance, if we're like, I'm not really sure I understand this shortlist thing, you can go down here and just see live versions of Shortlist, which was a recently updated app. And then you can click on live examples, and you can see what, for instance, Piedmont is doing with their shortlists. And you can tab through these and sort of see what that experience looks like. Let's reset this. There's also a bunch of other filters here. You can filter by subject, by industry. You can filter by author. So I like to come in here and see what our team is doing because they're always putting out really cool and interesting apps. And reset. You can also filter by format. So if you're looking to embed a story map in your organization's like larger website, you can see what other people have done as embedded in their apps. Or there's also, you can embed story maps in story maps, which gets a little complicated, and like you shouldn't go too far with that, but it is possible to have multiple story maps within story maps. We've also seen some web app builder in story maps, and it gets a little crazy, but use your judgment. Use your better judgment. So going back to the apps page, we are going to build about a third of a Cascade app in the next 4 minutes. So here's our Cascade app. If I just click this build button here, it launches me straight into Builder. And I'm going to need my hands for this, so I'm just going to hope I can talk louder. Let's see if that works. So first we need to figure out what we want to communicate with our audience. One of my favorite things to do on the weekend, I'll just hold this, that's cool. One of my favorite things to do on the weekend is to go for a hike. And when I moved from California to DC a few years ago, I found a few hikes in the area that were enjoyable. And so I want to describe those hikes to other people who may be new to the DC area. So that's sort of my goal in communicating here. So we're going to start in on the app about the hikes, and it's going to incorporate maps and 3D scenes and photos and text. And I've chosen Cascade because I sort of want a narrative format that like guides my audience through hikes. So I'm going to enter a story title here. So DC hikes. And so this is a whole builder function that if you are not at all a developer, this is completely accessible to you, and you can just choose what multimedia you want in here, and you don't need to know any coding at all. So we're going to search for Shenandoah. So as you can see, there are a number of different multimedia sources that we can use here. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. My bad. Let's pick this guy. So one of the things you can do in Cascade is sometimes your photo might not entirely fit in the screen, or for instance, there might be a more important point to your photo over here. So what you can do is you can drag this little dot around and say, on narrower screens or on larger screens, I want to make sure that this dot is always in the photo. So that's a nice feature of this app. We're going to save this and then start in on our development. I've already written some text over here just because it's boring to watch me write text. So I'm going to insert a text block. And then after my text block, I'm going to I want to give my users an experience of like a multimedia experience of what's coming next and what I'm talking about with my hikes. So I have a bunch of photos on my computer that I want to use here. So I'm just going to take all of these and drag them over here and drop them. And now they're going to upload as resources attached to this particular app. And I'm going to choose one photo. And I'm like, OK, great, one photo's fine. But let's add another one too. Oops, not there. Here. 2 photos are looking good. But maybe we need a third because this is spring and this is fall. So let's add a deer. And as this goes, this is an image gallery that we just added last week that's going to resize the photos and sort of arrange them as it sees fit. So since the screen is a little bit narrow, it bumps them down to the next line. And you can also like rearrange where the photos go in the flow of your gallery. So of course we are a GIS company, so we want to see where these hikes actually are. So this is integrated into ArcGIS Online, so I'm going to now choose a web map, DC hike overview. So this is a web map of the 4 hikes that I want to talk about, but it's pretty gigantic, so I'm going to change that to a smaller size here. And hit the home button, and so now we see where all of our 4 apps are. I'm sorry, our 4 hikes. And then one more text section just to sort of fill out the narrative. And now we come to the first hike that I want to talk about is called Old Rag. So I'm going to insert a title section that sort of breaks up the app, Old Rag. And I'm going to search for media again on a free search called Unsplash. And in particular, the title sections are a good place to demonstrate what that focus point does for the background, because this is not really the picture that I want for the hills. But if I drag this down here, that sort of gives a more complete picture of what the hill is going to look like. Oops. So I need a little bit more text about my Old Rag hike. And then I'm going to insert what's called an immersive section. An immersive section is a giant full screen multimedia content, and then it has these scrolling panels that are going by. So it's a cool way to like guide your users through a story. So the media that I'm going to add here is from my ArcGIS Online account, from my content. Get rid of this guy. And it's a 3D web scene. And the nice thing about Cascade is that it natively supports 3D scenes. It's going to take a second to load, so I'm going to copy some more text in here. This is the overview of Old Rag, or it will be when that loads. And I'm going to title this section Old Rag Hike. You can also change the format of these. So I'm going to take the background off of this title section so it's a little bit clearer. You can do the same thing to this panel. You can change the position of it. You can change the size of it. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Oops. Yes. And then I can configure what my 3D slide looks like here. And I'm going to just stick with the Old Rag overview, which is approximately the same as the initial view. So my goal here is for each hike, and I'm only going to do this for like one more slide, but for each hike to sort of guide my user through this hike in a 3D way that you're sort of like looking at each section at a time. So one thing you can do is you can duplicate an immersive view here, and that takes the exact same web scene. And now I want to look at the first part of the hike, which is the yellow part that switchbacks up the northern slope. Because I'm talking about the switchbacks and I don't have a legend in this, there's a way to get around always having legends, and that's to put colors, particularly if your map incorporates colors in its symbology, to use those colors in your text to show what you're talking about. So my switchbacks are yellow, so I'm going to change this switchbacks to yellow. And then it's obvious as the reader is scrolling through this, like, oh great, we're talking about the switchbacks yellow. To make it more obvious, this web scene has these slides that I've already configured before this to show which part of the hike we're talking about. So this is the switchback slide that's focused on just the yellow part of this. Because this is a very short demo theater, imagine that we've sort of done that for the remaining parts of the hike, and then that ends up looking something like this, although that's a different overview picture. So this is the gallery, the photo gallery that we saw, and it sort of changes size and layout based on the width of your screen. Here's our narrative section, the map talking about where all of the hikes are. This starts the old rag section, it's the title. And then you get to this immersive section, the scene loads, there's the overview, and you've got these scrolling panels that sort of go by and lead your users on a tour of what you're talking about. You can do the same thing with web maps. You can turn layers on and off. You can decide which pop-ups to show immediately. And you can change the extent of the map that you're working with as well.
All right, thanks, Alison. I guess this. So now that you guys have seen what some of the story map apps look like and how easy it is to build and put one together, let's take a look at what that means for you as a developer in customizing and extending these apps to fulfill your project requirements. There's a couple different levels of efforts. The most common level of customization is probably adding custom styles through CSS. And for most customizations and extensions, you're going to have to go through our GitHub repos and download our code and host it on your own web server. The one exception to that is if you happen to be using our map journal app, there's actually a way to add your own custom CSS style rules in the builder through the text editor in the content panel in a mode called source view. And I'll give you a little peek into what that looks like. So this is our map journal app. This is one of the more narrative-based apps. It's kind of laid out like a blog. We've got our main stage there on the right, which is a web map. It could be an image or a video or another website. Over here is our text content. We can also put images and stuff in there, but if we hit this little pencil icon, this will trigger this into edit mode. And here we can stylize the different text and content that we have in here, but this little source view mode will actually turn it into kind of a raw HTML layout that you can go in there, add additional markup, as well as adding custom CSS rules. So by adding that, we knew that that little area over there, because we've worked with this app, has a CSS class of the side panel, and so we went ahead and added the background color magenta to that. So that makes it real obvious what kind of difference that's making there, but you could add that to any of the different elements within the map journal there and customize and skin it to whatever your project requirement needs are. For the other apps, you would have to download the code and jump into the index.html in your text editor of choice. We've got a little placeholder within the index.html in between style tags where we have the commented out custom CSS rules, and this is where you would plop in all of your CSS rules to reskin any of these story map apps to fulfill any of your needs, or if you want to add any corporate theming requirements. The third level of customization is adding additional functionality through adding JavaScript code. In the download, you'll find a file that's called customscripts.js. And this is where you would add any functionality that you would want to. An example of this might be that you want to add a splash page when your app loads that welcomes your viewers in and introduces your topic, adds additional context. You might want to add a widget where they can switch the base map from something like topographic map to something that's like more imagery based. Might give a better geographic context to your users. Or what can be found on our developers blog, there's an example where you can actually add a Google Street Image widget, where you can drop the little Google Street guy onto your web map, and then it'll open up in another tab. You'll actually get that street view. So there's lots of possibilities here, and especially incorporating more of the Esri's ArcGIS for JavaScript API functionality, adding more widgets and things like that. And then the final one is if you really want to go hog wild and change a lot of the UI, but still tap into a lot of the base code for each of the apps. You download the source or developer's code and then use our documentation on rebuilding the app to get deployed or production-worthy code out of that. So we have API for developers. That's the custom scripts file. So basically we have some event hooks in there that you can tap into. So you want to make sure like the topic.subscribe TPL ready. Basically that means the application is loaded, all your dependencies are ready to go, so you'll know whatever you drop in there will work properly and function as expected. And then each app has its own global app object, and there's lots of properties and methods that we tap into while we're developing these applications that you would be able to as well. We use that to retrieve the web map IDs that are used in each application item. There's some UI components that you could tap into to get some more methods out of that as well. So let's take a look at a couple customization examples quickly. So this is an example of our map tour, which is a place-based app. Points on a map. This is basically University of Virginia put together a sustainability tour of their campus. And each point has a title, description, image, and thumbnail associated with it. And as you can see, there's quite a few points, almost 100 points on this campus. Gets a little cluttered trying to figure out what is what, but they were able to add a nice green theme to it, which goes with the sustainability. But what they did is they did a customization, and what you can see here is they changed the map markers to differentiate one from another, and then they added a legend in the top right there that helps you distinguish the different themes in there and also explore if you wanted to find different transportation options. There's a bike share there. There's bike storage over here. They added a data download option here, so you can actually serve out the data that you're working with to your viewers. And then to pivot Map Tour once more, this is a huge overhaul that we actually as a team did in experimenting with different layouts. So we're actually using that same base code that MapTour is built on, but then we added a bunch of new user interface elements. So it's the exact same data model. It's just basically points with a title, description, and images. But the layout's totally different, a lot more modern looking. And then we've also actually added a slideshow in here, so there's actually multiple images per point. And then there's also an ability to switch views. So we're actually making that map a little bit smaller and then making the images a little bit predominant. So I'll just talk briefly about the technical architecture that we use. All of our apps use modular design, AMD, so we try and split out all our components into their own sections of code and load them as needed. An example of that would be, as Alison demonstrated with the builder, there's a lot of user interface elements that were present that allowed her to add different media or jump between sections or a text editor, things like that. But then when she showed you the final product, it was a much cleaner and more simple user interface, and that's because we're not loading all those unnecessary items because we know that it's in viewer mode and not in edit mode. And it makes the apps more performant. We're not delivering that to the client, so it's a lot slimmer. For the most part, we don't use any JavaScript framework. We're obviously building on top of the ArcGIS for JavaScript API, which is on top of Dojo. We usually include jQuery just for the convenience of some of the methods that they provide. Bootstrap, we definitely tap into for components for Builder. And then React is something that's a little bit more new to us. We used it for our crowdsource app in Cascade, and then we're probably looking to do a little bit more with that in the future. For some of our apps, we use Lodash for our views to inject, to do templating, basically inject our markup. It's a little bit more efficient way of doing that. And then finally, to get our deployment or production-ready code, we use a build chain that uses Node and Grunt. And then this is kind of what our app code actually looks like. And a lot of our apps share some of the same common code. and libraries. So you'll see the ArcGIS API for JavaScript, jQuery Bootstrap at the bottom. In those core files, you'll find a lot of the calls that go to the ArcGIS portal or ArcGIS Online to get the app item data, which contains a lot of the media information, whether we have web maps or images, and so we can kind of chain those together to start retrieving all those necessary things to build up our app. And then on the top there, under the apps, that's the app-specific code. The builder view, that's the builder-specific code that only gets loaded in the builder. If you're going to be going in and customizing and extending these apps, most likely you won't be getting into the builder stuff. It would be kind of cool if you did, but probably would have to have a big organization that's going to be tapping into those efforts to make it worthwhile. The main view is probably where you'd be looking, that and then the user interface for adding more components. And then in the middle there is that build task that I spoke about earlier. We use Node, Grunt, JS Hint, Require.js to get those files all together. So on the left, you're probably looking at dozens of files. Really bulky, definitely not good for deployment, but if you run it through that build task, we'll get a minified code base over on the right, so much less files that we're delivering. And then this is kind of a look into our GitHub repo. If you start tapping into that, that's what I spoke about with the common code, and then the TPL is for templates, so that's kind of the app-specific code, so that's probably where you'd be looking if you're looking to extend these. And speaking of GitHub repos, all of our code is open source and available on the Esri GitHub. We do a lot of documentation on there. We make sure that we offer release notes to let you know what's new for enhancements, any bug fixes that came through. There's some documentation on there for helping you to customize and extend, and then also the instructions to build and deploy that app if you go in and need to do that. So this is the GitHub repo for the map journal. And there you'll find little screenshots of what the app looks like. You'll look at some live examples to see what it's about. And then here's kind of a table of contents of things that as a developer you might find interesting. There's a developer guide here, the customized look and feel, and then there's instructions on how you'll be able to build. And then a last good resource is our Story Maps Developers Corner. This is an ongoing blog that we update regularly with what's new every release, let you guys know what kind of new stuff is coming out. There's a Get Started section just to get you oriented with what's going on and what are the possibilities. There's some tutorials to get your feet wet and start to get an understanding of how this all works. Take a look at that site. And on the banner here, through the nav bar, you can kind of get started there, and there's different levels of some of the blog posts and activities that you can jump into. I'll skip over the overview for the sake of time. If you're interested in more information on configuring and customizing web apps, our colleagues will be doing an additional session tomorrow afternoon from 1 to 2, just across the hallway in Mesquite, G&H. And that is all we have for you today. We don't have anyone in here afterwards, so if there's any questions, we can certainly take those and hang out. We also have an island on the showcase floor. Be there till it closes Thursday evening, so feel free to stop by there. But does anyone have any questions right now? All right, thanks so much, guys. Have a great conference.